In this week's episode, I'm joined by Oertli Mooney, Managing Director of Seramount and proud Bulldog parent to the Golden Girls. This week, our conversation is about corporate shareholders shutting down anti-DEI measures, magic nerds proving they have the biggest hearts, long overdue justice, and more. Hey there, my name is Bernadette Smith, and I'm a keynote speaker and writer. My pronouns are she and her. Welcome to 5 Things in 15 Minutes, my weekly show where I bring good vibes to DEI. That is good vibes to diversity, equity, and inclusion with a little dash of corporate social responsibility. What I found is there are lots of news stories about what's going wrong in the world and lots of negative data. But there are also a lot of things going right. That's what I like to focus on. I search for stories that we can be inspired by and learn from. My hope is to inspire you to experiment with some of these actions and policies to help you build a more inclusive world. Let's get started. Welcome to the show, Katie. It is such a treat to have you on today. Thank you so much for joining.
So great to be here, Bernadette, and so excited to actually spend some time in the good vibes in DEI.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, they are harder to find than ever, but it is probably more important than it has been, you know, even over I think I've written my newsletter for 6 years now, so it's as important as ever, if not more. Can you tell us a little bit about your work?
I am just incredibly lucky to be a part of such amazing work that is being done every single day. I mean, first and foremost, by the 600, what we call partners who make up Seramount's not only Chief Diversity Officer Collaborative, but partnership base. The work has been really incredible when you think about being able to help provide research and really steward kind of really important conversations for our fellow DEI practitioners, all the way from, of course, those leading in the work, those across HR, across talent, and of course their teams. And let's not forget the incredible and powerful employee resource groups and allies that continue to advance DEI. So just honored to be part of an organization that continues to help support inclusive workplaces.
I love that. And how has the energy been? Or people must be relying on you more than ever. Like they must just feel a strong need for the support.
You know, it's absolutely, as we navigate through, I would say, a very volatile environment. I think also what has given me a lot of hope and a lot of, I would say, just joy is the fact that we've continued to host convenings where people who are leading this work come together. They share the proven practices that have worked so well for them, but they've also, talked and been able to really discuss some of the challenges, but really it's kind of this better together momentum that I'm seeing. And I think that's been part of what fuels even some of the good vibes in DEI right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we need each other, right? We need community. We need to be able to support each other and find strategic ways to keep moving forward. I think it requires a lot of savvy right now. So I would imagine that's the savviness is part of what you're bringing into your partners.
Absolutely.
So in this week's newsletter, I wrote about sort of one thing that's been giving me joy, which is finding a local queer pickleball community here in Chicago. So, last week I played 5 times. I was in a tournament on Saturday, made it to the playoffs, lost in the first round of the playoffs, but I'm still very, very proud of myself. And I've been, things have been slow. I'll be honest, things have been slow with my work. I've had time. And so for me, that means leaning into the things that bring me joy and accepting that part of being an entrepreneur is the privilege of freedom if I allow myself to experience that. And so when I was writing last week, I was just sort of thinking about how, in times of uncertainty like this, one instinct can be to try to, fix things. And that's sort of my normal go-to. But another instinct could be to make ourselves smaller, to hide. So it can be kind of a matter of fight or flight. in these uncertain times, in these volatile times. And my challenge to myself this time has been, instead of hustling and fixing and fighting, it's been to play. It's been choosing community, choosing joy, and knowing that that is going to carry me through in my relationships and what I can bring to my clients. So I think that there's actually a way to play strategically. And I was wondering what sort of how you are, besides the wonderful work you're doing with your partners, how are you sort of keeping your energy up and finding play and strategic play?
Oh, goodness. Well, I have to share with you, Bernadette, going back to pickleball.
Yes.
I am based out of Seattle, Washington, but actually more specifically an area called Bainbridge Island, Washington, which is the pickleball capital of the world. It actually was invented here in Bainbridge Island. So like you, of course, play absolutely is with pickleball. So we share that for sure. But it's interesting. I think about what has continued to fuel me in this moment. And I would say, honestly, there was a huge call to action that I faced many years ago when I saw the people who led us in our civil rights and social justice histories in a museum in Washington, D.C. And when I almost felt this like invisible baton kind of come down and say, what are you going to do with this? That baton continues to be something that I carry every single day with me. And, as we acknowledge that it is March and International Women's Day is coming up, Women's History Month, those really, quite frankly, pioneers that have really created so much of our freedoms, our liberties that we have been able to endure today continues to keep me motivated. As far as play, though, I will say I've always been one to say I love using the entire box of crayons and how beautiful colors are. And so I've gotten into a little bit more of the adult coloring and drawing. And so that has given me a little bit of the play and the joy. But, as I've always said, broken crayons work just as good as the perfectly sharp ones.
They do, absolutely. And I think that there's something that's kind of meditative about that experience of coloring as an adult. So I experimented with that for a little bit. It did not stick for me personally, but I definitely found the meditative part to be helpful for sure. And, it's so important to have that strong sense of why and that strong sense of purpose that you were talking about, that invisible baton. Is there anyone in particular you want to give a quick shout out to for passing that to you before we move into this week's Good Vibes?
Oh, goodness. It's going to be probably a couple unsung heroes, but I would say the first one, absolutely, I would say was my mother-in-law. She immigrated into this country and she worked hard her entire life and showed me what real hard work is invisibly as a hotel cleaner, essentially, and housekeeper her entire life. And showing how important it is even to, when we have opportunity to use our voice, to advocate for those who are invisible or can't use their voice. On a probably more public platform, I think I had a really incredible gift last year where I got the chance through our president at Seramount, Sue Berry, and her very close relationship with the infamous Gloria Steinem, where I was able to thank her, especially in the spirit of International Women's Day and women's history, for all of the incredible work and advocacy that she had done for women, and of course for so many allies in our work and in women's history.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you said those names this Women's History Month, Katie. Thank you. My parents were immigrants as well, and I saw their hard work and their ethic. But I also, well, that's a story for another day. All right, let's move into this week's Good Vibes. All right, the first story this week is about how the MacArthur Foundation and the Freedom Together Foundation are increasing their giving to fill the gap since federal grants and foreign aid are frozen under the Trump administration. So philanthropy has really stepped up. The MacArthur Foundation is committing an additional $150 million over 2 years, and Freedom Together is doubling their grant making to 10% of its endowment. So important.
So important. Yeah, Bernadette, that is a good news DEI story. And I'm so glad that you kicked off with that. I was thinking about, and this trues back a little bit to, as I shared a little bit about my mother-in-law, and of course, some of my service in Washington State has been to the Asian Counseling and Referral Service called the ACRS, a nonprofit organization that works towards social justice and really provides a broad array of services for Asian, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders, and other communities in our county. Mm-hmm. But when I think about whether it be the aging services for older adults, which my mother-in-law takes advantage of, or employment and training services, English literacy classes, vocational skills training, citizenship and immigration assistance, helping navigate the naturalization process, or even some of the recovery services in the community and the food bank, I think about, this mattered. That there is this real, as they said, kind of crisis when it comes to the freezing of federal grants, which organizations like ACRS and so many organizations that are doing so much goodwill around the world depend on. And so I just can't help but think what an incredible offering from the MacArthur Foundation, and that gift to really help and support so many people that depend and rely on this service.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how bad things could get if these grants continue to stay frozen and if we don't see foundations increasing their giving. I mean, it's already bad, so I can't even imagine how much worse. Okay, the second story this week comes from Deere. So Deere, John Deere, the tractor essential farming supply company, their investors overwhelmingly rejected an anti-DEI resolution, with only 1.3% of them showing support for this resolution. What I think is particularly notable here is that last year, Deere pulled back from DEI. They pulled back from Pride events and other DEI initiatives. And so the investors actually said, we like this stuff, which I think is really important to know, especially in a fairly conservative industry. So I think this is absolutely a good vibe because the pressure is on these companies right now.
Agree. And I think also too, it's just this like continuous drive where DEI is then tied to that business case that we always talk about. And when you think about the growing diversity of the US consumer base, and of course, not exclusively just in the US, but when you think about particularly the US consumer base, multicultural kind of consumers already count for about 40% of the US population. And we're just continuously seeing from like the US Census, for example, that we're going to see the number of Black, Latina, Asian consumers are going to increase 2.3 million each year, truthfully. And, as we think about all of this and quite frankly, opportunity on the table, I think that is really kind of where the shareholders said that this is absolutely critical, that we are customer centric, engaging the customer of the future, which happens to be diverse, and that, we have to engage with them and they will use their buying power and actually kind of abandon, I would say, brands who don't align to their same kind of projections or their same missions, if you will. We will actually need to create inclusive marketing and design if we're going to continue to attract the ever-changing and expanding consumer base.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's why some of these pullbacks are so short-sighted. We especially with Target in particular, which has really seen a significant drop in foot traffic and a lot of backlash. So, you're right. The census does not lie. I mean, this is the reality of our beautiful world. And so just seeing the shareholders say, you know what, we care about this. And I can't wait to see how other companies continue to take their shareholders, sentiments to heart. It's going to keep happening more and more, I think. Okay, The third story this week comes from Magic the Gathering, which is a role-playing game that I have no experience with. I know really nothing about it. But I know that it's very popular, and the gamer or the YouTuber Tolarian Community College, which has a creator named Brian Lewis, they raised over $564,000 for Trans Lifeline, a crisis hotline for transgender folks. So this channel has an annual fundraiser, but this particular one set a financial record. And you know what? Trans Lifeline had to pause its microgrants program due to financial struggles, and there has been so much anti-trans rhetoric, anti-trans hate, rights being stripped away. I mean, all of this, the news about trans folks has just been absolutely heartbreaking. And then we see this. So gives me a little bit of hope, Katie.
Absolutely. And I think what is amazing, of course, about Trans Lifeline is they come in, as I understand, at the perfect time where they can really offer direct emotional, financial support to trans people truly in a crisis. I mean, the work they are doing is life-saving for the trans community. And when you think about this opportunity for people to kind of, as we just talked about, kind of, buy or vote on their feed or, kind of crowdsource and come together collectively, which is so important. I mean, such power that they are able to, create such an amazing impact, especially for a community that is under such scrutiny right now.
That's a lot of money for them, for that organization. They can do a lot with that. So it gives me chills even just thinking about all the people that came together to contribute. So,
and it sets the blueprint for what I hope is some more copycats.
Yes, exactly. And when there are more copycats, you can be sure I'll talk about them in 5 things.
Absolutely.
All right, the fourth story this week is about how Black modernist architects are finally getting their due. So they've been overlooked for decades, but a new $4.6 million Getty Foundation initiative is preserving their work through grants to restore 24 buildings. So Black architects only make up 2% of the profession, and there has been a lot of systemic erasure of their work over time. But these new grants are about restoring buildings such as the Charles McAfee Pool, one of Kansas's first to offer Black swimmers competitive length lanes. And these are examples of how architecture intersects with civil rights. So important.
I can't wait to see more of these spaces kind of open and go visit them and learn not only the rich traditions and the histories, but to your point, how they were able to unlock opportunity, accessibility, and more importantly, even the just incredible beautification and artistry of those architects.
Absolutely. And I would love for more people to know their names, right? We have to say their names. So important. And also by increasing the visibility, then hopefully at some point down the line, we'll see more Black architects, right?
Absolutely. We need plenty more that join in that discourse and in that field. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. And the last story this week comes from the state of Texas, which does not get a lot of shout outs here on 5 Things. But this time they have fixed an old law, essentially, that placed students with dyslexia in 504 plans instead of full special education. So Texas public schools have sidestepped the federal law, and now they are actually following this law by making sure that students with dyslexia are moved to special education by this summer, ensuring they have legal safeguards, they have comprehensive evaluations. And there have been a lot of parents fighting for this for a long time. So this is going to be a really significant, or can be a significant game changer for these students who have probably been floundering without adequate support.
Bernadette, can we actually just talk about that this is an equity practice?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that when people get so, I would say, the word equity, it's like misunderstood, misconstrued. It's really being weaponized right now. And when you think back to the practices of equity, and I love, like, my dear friend, Minal Bapaya, she wrote a book called Equity, How to Design Organizations Where Everyone Can Thrive, which has been such a tool for me. But, when we think about equity and those systems and those policies and processes, that are really so incredibly critical, like this one, to create equal access to opportunity, us understanding the needs of someone that identifies dyslexic is going to allow for us to redesign systems, policies, and processes so they can thrive. And, I think sometimes when we hear the DEI word, especially right now, or it all coming back together, when you unpack equity and you take a story like Texas, who has been able to really be a leader in this, at least from this story as you shared, this is the equity work. And this is what we realize, quite frankly, when you have a diverse group that identify dyslexic, and with equity principles, so they can thrive, so we understand them, and so that they can thrive, we then get to inclusion and belonging, which is that thing we all continue to desire. So you couldn't put a bow better on the 5 good things in DEI, but that truly is what DEI is.
Yeah, and the word has been so weaponized, right? But I think that how many parents have kids with dyslexia or other special needs and didn't even understand that an initiative like this was in fact equity, right? That was setting their kids up for success. And without these types of programs, it's just going to be our country is going to flounder, right? Because there are so many people who fall into these categories for one reason or another. So absolutely. And I love your passion, Katie. I absolutely love it, because this stuff, it can be tough. It's so hard right now. So we have to keep showing up, and we have to keep shining a light on these good vibes.
Absolutely. Thank you for creating the platform.
Absolutely. You're welcome. So let's move into this week's good vibes to go. So I'll share a good vibe to go, and then I will invite you to share a good vibe to go. Okay, so it is, as you said, Women's History Month, and I want to give a shout out to my partner, Heather Vickery, who is a coach, and I don't talk about her much. I don't share much about her, but she is a delight, and she has helped a lot of people. She does some leadership coaching with employee resource groups as well, and she has a great YouTube channel. So I will make sure that gets put in the chat and in the show notes, so you folks can hopefully check out some of Heather's work as well this Women's History Month. All right, Katie, what is your good vibe to go?
I'll stay with Women's History Month. I will say I'm a big reader, and history often tells me that story, the baton, as I talked a little bit earlier. But I read a book called The Great Stewardess Rebellion. And it was when women and how they launched a workplace revolution at 30,000 feet by author Nell McShane Woolhart. And when I was reading it and thought about how far these women had fought for us to not just be the stewardess on the airline. My recent flight from New York City, when that went ding, ding, a pilot came on that happened to be a woman. And I was so excited to know that I was in the safe hands of a woman that was not only a part of the airline, but that was flying us back to my home.
I love that. I mean, what the thing is that why is it always so surprising, right? When is it going to not be surprising when we hear a woman pilot? I look forward to that day.
Exactly. I'm with you there.
All right. So thank you so much for being a delightful guest, Katie. How can folks get in touch with you?
Well, I would invite any conversation, of course, on this topic and so many more of the good vibes for DEI. Of course, LinkedIn is always a platform, but hello@seramount.com can get anyone access over to me. And Bernadette, I just want to thank you for the long time I've known you and continuing to do this work in advocacy, and so that we can all be aware whether we are in allyship, in supportive, and in leading. This is, quite frankly, the important part of the work. And I want to thank you so much for being an incredible, inspirational contributor to it.
That's very nice of you to say. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I hope that you have a great week. And folks, if you don't already get the 5 Things newsletter, you can subscribe at 5thingsdei.com. Thank you so much. Have a great week. Thank you for listening to 5 Things in 15 Minutes. I hope you found yourself inspired by at least one of this week's stories. If you did, would you mind sharing it with a colleague and leaving us a review on your favorite podcasting platform? And if you don't already get my 5 Things newsletter, join at 5thingsdei.com. I'm Bernadette Smith, and I'll see you next week right here for 5 Things in 15 Minutes, bringing good vibes to DEI.